Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Today, we are breaking down some backfield battles that you need to keep track of as training camps get started across the league. Let's start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Sign up with that promo code ROTOPOD, that's ROTOPOD, for that first deposit match up to $100. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Mario, I have safely returned once again, beating all the odds, and survived yet another trip to RotoWire Las Vegas.
Oh, did you just buzz out there? Sorry, I couldn't hear you for that last second.
Maybe my internet is going as slow as my brain is, but I have survived yet another trip with the RotoWire guys for the Roto Las Vegas.
Did you place any big bets or whatever?
Let's see. I threw down mostly on Heisman. A bunch of my NFL stuff has already been accounted for going into the year, and I have like a couple more trips to states with legal sports betting to make sure I'm totally ready. But most of my sports betting in Vegas this time around was focused on the Heisman. I won't bore you all too much with that because this is obviously an NFL centric show. But Mario, let's go ahead and kick things off today. Again, we are breaking down some backfield battles to monitor as training camps get rolling. And you've gone ahead and up on the RotoWire site, you've written like a 5-part series to this point on these backfield battles. Cover it for you?
Yeah, we're gonna go to the receivers and tight ends on Monday, but the running backs were a 5-part thing.
Yes, it deserves that level of attention to detail, and you certainly gave it that. So definitely recommend checking that out in written form over on the site. But I want to start things off with the Cincinnati Bengals and their backfield situation. Obviously, Joe Mixon being gone leaves a lot of things up for negotiation in that backfield. They had Chase Brown kind of come on late in the year last year as a rookie, and then they went ahead and added Zack Moss, who had a nice resurgence last year in Indianapolis, to that backfield. So as it stands, Zack Moss, his ADP is sitting at 93 over on Underdog, and Chase Brown over at 123. So leading things off, do you think the market has it right as far as the order and the ADP here?
Yeah, I think it's fair. The prices on both Moss and Brown. I think there's a pretty solid basis to assume Moss will be the starter. And if that offense lives up to the standards, its recent standards, then Moss should be capable of producing for fantasy investors, probably at least as a flex play, maybe even more like a running back 2 type, depending on the matchup or whatever. But one thing that I think would be a little hasty would be to assume that Moss is going to get Joe Mixon's prior workload. And I say that for a couple reasons. I mean, one is, I guess the main one actually would be that Moss has gotten hurt every single year in his NFL career, and he hasn't even had, I mean, knock on wood, it's good that he hasn't had this problem, and I have an issue, but his knee might be a little bit of a time bomb. Like, it was a problem at Utah, and then it kind of has been okay in the NFL, and it's all been other weird injuries, but missed time every single year. And the other thing is he's not getting paid that much. Zack Moss isn't. It's either going to be a 1-year $4.5 million deal or a 2-year $8 million deal, which is like, that's probably less than like Gerald Everett's getting paid or something, you know? So I think that the Bengals are not particularly committed to Moss. I think they see him as a worthwhile and overall good bargain, a solid player who can do useful things, all of which are true. But I don't think they're like, we got to make him a centerpiece of the offense. I think it's just, he'll probably get the first couple shots, but between the injury history and Brown's contrasting play, I think it'll be tough to keep Brown off the field because he offers a nice change of pace, and he's either the same weight as Moss or only trivially less than Moss weight-wise, and he's much faster than Moss. I mean, Moss at best runs like a 4.65, something like that, whereas Brown ran the 4.43 coming out of Illinois. So it's it might be true to say that Chase Brown did not have the trust of Zack Taylor for pass blocking or whatever his rookie year, but that's almost just like a de facto cliche that pretty much any coach will apply to a running back that they didn't take in the first 3 rounds or something.
Right.
If you take a running back in the first 3 rounds, guess what? It doesn't matter how bad they are pass blocking. They're just going to play anyway. But when it's 5th rounder, coaches like to go, I think he needs to improve his blitz pickup. Like, whatever. If you need yardage at some point, and Brown gives them that.
He does. So I think that this kind of ends up being a timeshare where both of these players can at least hit value. That if they both stay healthy, though, it'll be tough for either of them to like truly, give their investors like a major profit boost relative to their draft slot. But I think that there's good cases to be made for each of these guys at their respective ADPs. And I personally have more of Chase Brown at this stage, and I think that it's kind of an interesting tier of running backs that he's in among the larger ADP landscape. But Moss being the vet, being the free agent signing, like he'll definitely get his workload as well there. Anything else to add when it comes to this Cincinnati backfield?
Not really. I am kind of getting both of those guys, and like you, I'm getting Brown more, but it's just because he's cheaper and it's easier to kind of accidentally end up with him.
Right, exactly. So that's where I stand with it as well. Let's get a message from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Tonight, as if you weren't already aware, this is a bit of a dead week in sports with the All-Star break still going on. So no picks for y'all on this particular episode, but once baseball's back in full swing next week, we'll get into that. But as always, you can check out the RotoWire Picks tool for every single sport right now. Obviously, MLB, WNBA are the hot spots over on Prize Picks, but we'll have tons more once football gets underway. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We also got a message from our friends over on the Blue Wire Network. And we're moving on to Carolina. So a lot of people very, very excited by the prospects of one Jonathon Brooks, the rookie out of Texas, coming off of a knee injury late in his final season there in Austin. His ADP checks in at 87 over at Underdog, whereas Chuba Hubbard significantly cheaper than him at 162. So I think I have an idea of where we're leaning here, Mario. But I mean, can we at least start out by making the case as to why Brooks might be going as high as he is?
So I'm not drafting Brooks, but I think the case for him makes enough sense in terms of the stated premises. I happen to think at least a couple of the premises are a little bit wrong, but if Brooks is the player that a lot of people think that he is, then he should be worth that pick in best ball or whatever. Even if he starts slow, that fantasy playoff stretch, he could be their lead runner and by a significant amount. Even as someone who's lower on Brooks than most people, I would admit that he's definitely a way better pass catcher than Chuba Hubbard. So to me, it makes a lot of sense for the Panthers, given the November 11th ACL tear, given the fact that they're not competing, given the fact that Jonathon Brooks got hurt every year at Texas. I think that it makes sense to ease Brooks in this year by largely keeping him in space, getting him screen passes, targets rather than carries, especially not power carries. Why when Chuba Hubbard is on the last year of his rookie deal anyway, wouldn't you give Hubbard those kind of high impact carries where there's a beating to be taken and not much yardage to be had? Like that's a situation that just seems clearly to me makes more sense to give the ball to Hubbard there. But I think some of the problem that I have with Brooks's current valuation is that a lot of people seem to believe he's something like a blue chip prospect, or that he might have been a first rounder, or that he's comparable to any given best running back in any draft or whatever. And that's not true. This last running back class still sucked. It was still a really weak class. And I don't even believe that Brooks was the best running back in the class, but let's just say that he is. These guys are not Brooks, in my opinion, is not a prospect on the caliber of players like J.K. Dobbins or even DeAndre Swift. And Swift now goes later in the ADP than Brooks, even though he's definitely starting for the Bears this year, all year. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing that I look at, and I kind of wonder, like, that's maybe someone believing, a certain narrative getting spun about this player that won't hold up under scrutiny, won't hold up in hindsight, because I think rather than a first round talent, Brooks is more just kind of a maybe late second, early third. And I think around 6 foot, 210 pounds, he probably runs something like a 4.55. So if he's weighing in at 216, 220 now, he's probably running more like a 4.58. I just don't see the production. By the way, the tools are unlikely to be great with Brooks, but the production is not that great either. He had over 24% of his rushing yardage Kansas. His career rushing yardage, 24%, more than 24% of it was against Kansas, just Kansas. So, yeah, Kansas merchant, probably only like a 50 grade athlete at best. The skill set's good, and again, particularly as a pass catcher, I think Brooks could be a 60, 70 catch running back in the NFL at his peak. But to me, that just makes him more like someone like Rachaad White than I don't know what kind of goofy. Some people probably have less insane comps for Brooks than this, but NFL.com compared him to Jamal Charles, the Lance Zierlein draft profile, compared Jonathan Brooks to Jamal Charles. So if that kind of nonsense is burrowing its way into people's heads, then I definitely am less likely yet to participate in that market.
Yeah, I think that there are just other options around him as far as the ADP is concerned, and with more clarified workloads. Like I'm going to take Zamir White over Jonathan Brooks, 10 times out of 10. DeAndre Swift, like you were mentioning, he's someone that I have a lot of shares of. So therefore,
James Conner, to me, I also think that if you apply that kind of like fantasy playoff strong finish logic to Brooks, you could just as easily apply it to Trey Benson too and move him up higher than he goes right now. So yeah, just the premises I don't think are that well reasoned with Brooks. Although when people say the argument the way they're thinking of it, it would make sense if they weren't wrong about the assumptions that they are making.
And then at what juncture do you think we start to see like the training wheels come off of Jonathan Brooks? Like I think we both reasonably expect him to have, sort of a capped workload in the early part of the season as he gets back up to 100% from that knee injury. But, do we think that, that proverbial playoff push could really happen with him?
Well, I definitely expect Brooks to finish the year better than he starts it. I don't know if that's to say that he'll be some kind of fantasy playoffs clincher. I don't really believe that. I just don't think he's that good. I think a lot of people assume that he'll be a monster because they have some notion that like, oh, he would have been a top 15 pick if not for the injury. And I feel comfortable assuming that's extremely not true. So I do give it, the assumption that that Brooks will finish much better than he started. But when he begins the year, week 1 through, 5, 6, I think there might be a lot of games where Brooks is playing fewer than 30 snaps. And I think it's, situations where they're trying to get him into the game with screen passes, tosses, draws, things that get Brooks into space so they can kind of, reacclimate him to the game without saying, now go into the teeth of the defense 15 times. And for what? So we can go 6-11? Is this what we're putting this guy up for 4 years in a row of getting hurt over? It just doesn't make sense to me.
No, I don't think so either. If you do want to take him in redraft, like how do you think you kind of need to construct your roster to make that make sense? Because there could be like that September where it's like this guy is not startable.
Right. Well, I think one thing that's going to sting some Brooks investors is they're going to feel compelled to start him even in weeks 1 through 6 or whatever, because they've bought the hype already. Like, why would you feel the way that you'd have to pick Brooks where he's going if you're just going to bench him for the first half of the year? Like, it just that person doesn't believe it's going to happen. So they're going to start him. And I mean, it doesn't take an Arthur Smith level sabotage to disappoint people's immediate rookie running back expectations. And you saw how people thought like, oh, Bijan Robinson's going to be Ezekiel Elliott rookie year per se. And it's like, you gotta look at who the players are and not just line up their pedigree and like cast characteristics versus similar historical, players and just assume that the conditions are the same between the two. It's just doesn't work. But yeah, I think I don't know. If you take Brooks, in my opinion, as much as it makes sense to start him right away, I would not personally want to assume he'll be productive in the first 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. So with that in mind, like I do wonder, and maybe this could be an episode topic, but like among guys going in the top 100 picks that could find themselves on waiver wires in redraft leagues, I do wonder.
Be on the waiver wire, but I think he'll be on. I think people by week 2 or 3 will already have the angry start sit questions about Brooks, and it's going to be like, hey man, I didn't tell you to draft him. I don't know what the hell to do either. Good luck. That's all I really have. Maybe
start someone else. But would you draft Chuba Hubbard on the same team as Jonathan Brooks?
Sure. I think it makes sense to take pretty much any player if the price, if the draft slot is favorable for what they're capable of giving you points wise. It's just still not an ideal situation because there will be games where Hubbard is not particularly productive. If he's a rushing specialist on a team that's going to lose most weeks, then he risks kind of getting the door slammed shut in the game script, like in the third quarter a lot of the time. So especially if he's going against a good run defense, you got to worry about Hubbard, I think. But to me, Hubbard is not just an early season play. I think Hubbard's a season long play. And so I see him as basically a cheap flex, or maybe if the matchup is good enough, if things fall the right way, maybe RB2 type when the matchup is favorable. But more realistically, I'm kind of I'm not planning on starting Hubbard every single week. I'm more so just kind of I'm hoping that I can correctly guess when the Panthers are going to get a decent run script and run matchup. And it's worth remembering Chuba Hubbard played in the Big 12 at Oklahoma State. He ran for more yards and touchdowns in 1 year than Brooks did in 3 at Texas. So as much as people like to reduce these running back questions to matters of, well, who has the higher draft capital? Who was drafted by the most recent regime or whatever? You still got to look at what they've done, And Chuba Hubbard ran for 2,100 yards in 13 games or whatever at Oklahoma State. So don't just assume the guy's a bum as a runner. He's a former 4th round pick who was dominant and more productive than Brooks in college. He was good last year on it. He was Chuba Hubbard was the only thing keeping that cursed offense even vaguely, anchored to the ground last year. And he's not just going to go away quietly. By the way, this part of the problem with this whole Brooks narrative is that there's this selective media hype about various coaching comments because Dave Canales identified Derek Brown, Tommy Tremble, and Chuba Hubbard as like the 3 offseason leaders of the team. He said like Chuba Hubbard's like one of our leaders. We love him. So if that were a player who rather than Hubbard, who the fantasy The fantasy elite media don't care about Hubbard. They have other narratives to tend to. If it had been one of their guys, if it had been like Marshawn Lloyd who got that comment, it would have been like headlines. Oh my God, it's trending. You got to plaster it on all the Discord chats. Instead, Dave Canales says, we love Chuba Hubbard. Man, I love that freaking guy. And everyone just goes like, oh, he hates Chuba Hubbard. He hates him. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they just put the earmuffs on. Like, I did not hear that. Chuba Hubbard, not real. I'm still going to draft Jonathan Brooks type of attitude there. But I think Chuba is definitely like one of the best last like running backs that I feel comfortable taking with any level of confidence. He's going to give me something more than a goose egg. You know, you get a little further down, it's like, well, maybe. But with Hubbard, you feel like that there's at least going to be some weeks where he's providing you a decent amount of floor. Like, I think between him and Ray Davis, where they go in drafts, like after pick 160, those are just kind of the running backs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I just think that's the way to go about it when it comes to this Panthers backfield. We know it's not going to be amazing. We know it's not going to be a particularly high scoring offense whatsoever.
They have to run it. By the way, yeah. They have to run it. They can't have a game script where they just throw it 40 times and Brooks is on the field, and hurry up the whole time. Bryce Young is getting snapped in half if you do that. So they have to run it, and they need Chuba Hubbard. If they're going to run it, they need him to be part of the way they do it.
And yeah, I think he is absolutely ready to do that. And it could be like you said with the contract year detail, like just run him as much as they can, and then show him the door next year.
Let some other team sign Hubbard as a starter, get a free 4th round pick out of it. Easy. And you don't break Jonathan Brooks's ACL again in a pointless season.
You might be giving the Panthers brass too much credit, but that does seem pretty reasonable.
Oh yeah, I do not mean to give them credit. Don't misunderstand me. Yeah.
Theoretically, they could do that. Before we get on over to our next backfield, we got a message from our friends over at Acme Real Fantasy Football. What's with fantasy football scores looking like an NBA All-Star game these days? Let's get real with Acme Real Fantasy Football. The top pro teams average around 28 points a game. This is how Acme Real Fantasy Sports scoring system is based. The system is also very accurate compared to the actual game score. Each team drafts only 9 players, filling the primary positions. Benches are only used for injured and bye-week players. This leaves 200 free agents available to improve your team. Weekly waivers give preference to the bottom of the league standings. League rankings are always changing and keeping it competitive the entire season. Acme Real Fantasy Football also has a one-of-a-kind playoff format, selecting a new lineup each week. All teams are competing from week 1 through the Super Bowl. 12-team leagues start at only $120. Go to acmerealfantasyfootball.com and sign up today. We also got a message from our friends over at Fantrax. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had, or features that are missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules, or playoffs, deeper team settings? Well, look no further, because we have you covered with our friends over at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy football platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Fantrax even has college fantasy football leagues, so those are great. Can't endorse that enough. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league. Invite your friends and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty football platform in the industry. Are you coming from another service? Not a problem. Fantrax can easily import any of your current leagues and rosters. Ever have a trade go wrong or make a mistake in dropping a player? Fantrax commissioner tools allow you to undo any move with one simple click. Fantrax is running a special promotion you don't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire to enter for your chance to win tickets at any regular season NFL game for you and your entire league, plus $6,000 in spending cash. That's right, tickets for your entire league. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, Mario, let's go over to the Mile High City. Let's talk about this Denver Broncos backfield. Javonte Williams, ADP sitting at 113, it looks like. Jaleel McLaughlin, 153, and Audric Estime at 208, according to some of the latest best ball ADP. I'll confirm that to make doubly sure here, but I believe that is the case. Yeah, Javonte Williams 113 on Underdog, so he's slipped a little bit. He's got the dreaded down arrow next to his name as far as the ADP movement is concerned.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, this is still just the ongoing effect of the completely unsubstantiated report from Cecil Lammey, like a month, 6 weeks ago? How long ago did this nonsense start? Nothing has changed other than people in internet fantasy scenes, especially on Twitter, have now had time to kind of spin their hamster wheels in their heads and drive themselves crazy with thinking about how Jaleel McLaughlin is pretty much the same as Devon Achane now, and whatever else these kind of folks are going to come up with. But Javonte Williams is, as we talked about before, John, he was a guy we were actually pushing against the hype on in his draft. Yeah. All these people were a lot of the same people who are already tossing him in the trash for some reason, were at the time saying his missed tackles forced per carry is this much going back this many years, and that means he's better than Travis Etienne. And so we had to kind of say, shut up, no, that's not true. And so we have no reason to be biased toward Javonte Williams in this case. And yet, I mean, sorry, this is ridiculous. It is possible that the Broncos might try to trade him, I guess, because they might just decide if we get a fourth rounder, we're doing it, something like that. But if that happens, Javonte is just starting on the other team. And in the meantime, he's the best Denver running back. He was probably their best running back last year when he was less healthy than he is now. So second year back from the ACL tear, the guy's done nothing wrong in the NFL. As much as we were kind of pushing back against the Javonte hype, his draft, it wasn't because we thought he was bad. We thought he was good. We just didn't think he was as good as Etienne. And right. His rookie year was totally fine, totally solid. Then he had bad luck, and a lot of bad luck. The Broncos and the ACL, just the Broncos being the way they are, and he just handled all of it. He did a totally decent job. So Javonte Williams is still the player that he was, or we should, I think, expect him to be the same player he was his rookie year, when tons of people were looking for reasons to hype him as like a top 3 NFL running back. If you believe that back then, just go do it again. Just get back to there. I mean, I don't quite sign off on the level of hype that there was at the time, but anyone who hyped Javonte Williams back then should just be right back in, no questions asked right now. And the idea that, in particular, that like Audric, Estime, or McLaughlin is going to put Javonte Williams on the bench is just crazy. I mean, Sean Payton uses a lot of running backs. He always has. Go look at his Saints rosters. He would burn through, Chris Ivory, like Reggie Bush, Pierre Thomas, Darren Sproles, all in the same season. So that's just kind of how he's always done things. And yeah, he's probably going to split up the workload on some basis where he gets McLaughlin like 15, 20 snaps, maybe P. Ryan. But if P. Ryan is on the team, I think Estime is a scratch. Simple as that. And maybe they trade P. Ryan, and maybe Estime is active then. Still not as good as Javonte Williams. It's like, I think we both liked Estime as some amount as a prospect. There's no serious comparison between him and Javonte Williams as a prospect. It's nonsense to even like raise the discussion. So clearly, to me, it doesn't really make much sense that Javonte Williams keeps slipping just because people are kind of driving themselves crazy, idly spinning narratives that they have no insight on. And I think while that offense will not be great, Javonte Williams will be better than he was last year on basically the same workload, maybe more.
Right, exactly. So last year, coming off the knee injury, he had 217 carries in 16 games. Like, that's totally respectable. Obviously, like, the efficiency was not ideal. Like, 3.6 yards per carry, that's not good. But, prior to that, he had averaged well over 4 yards a carry in his NFL career. And I think that, you can give him a little bit of grace for coming back from like a really significant knee injury in week 5 of his second season. So he's clearly the best at like all functions in this offense. I think there's still room for McLaughlin, of course, but I don't know, maybe this gets stratified a little bit if they do move on from P. Ryan, that the way they went out and got him last year and then didn't really use him that much. Well, how much do they really want to tie up to him?
I will say
Pirine
was actually really productive on passing down snaps. So I think they might want to keep all 4 of those running backs. But if they get rid of anybody, it would have to be Pirine. And some people have been hoping that Dallas will trade for him, somebody like that. That could happen. It's also possible, though, that the Broncos are just kind of like, hey, we like having that 240-pound blitz pickup guy who produced 8.1 yards per target, catching 50 of 56 targets last year on 340 snaps. Like that's extremely productive passing down work in general, because Pirine's also their best blocker.
Yeah, hand up. I underestimated the effect of Pirine, or the effectiveness of Pirine last year. But to be fair to myself, it's not like Denver was appointment viewing.
It was Russ Wilson checking down a lot to Williams. Yeah, basically their offense was they run it 2 times for every 1 pass, and every time they pass it, it's either going to Sutton or it's getting checked down to whichever running back is on the field.
Yeah, and then kind of drawing a similar parallel to Carolina, like, do you think that this is an offense where they absolutely need to run it? Didn't give Bo Nix some cover as a rookie.
The Broncos, yeah, and
yes.
Sean Payton is a running inclined offensive coordinator. I mean, as much as Drew Brees is what Payton's remembered for, Payton also had to find a way to make Kerry Collins vaguely productive with the Giants way back in 2000. So it's like he had Tiki Barber and whatever, Ron Dane or something like that back then. Maybe I can't remember when Payton went to Dallas.
Thunder and Lightning.
But, yeah. So in any case, Payton he takes running seriously. It's not just that he needed to give shelter to Wilson, though that certainly is true about Wilson last year. Like, Nix is going to need that shelter too. I think the model that they're going for is just one where maybe they end up throwing it a good amount, but if they do, it's because of kind of applying tempo and moving the chains reliably. It won't really it won't be like they throw the ball a lot because they're throwing it 55% of the time. Like, they're gonna make all those running backs work. And like I said, go look at Sean Payton's history with the Saints. He more than most people understands, like, you're going to go through running backs. And if you want to use running backs all the time, if you want to make them work, you need more than one good one. And so I expect the Broncos to keep all 4 of those guys, and Blake Watson goes to the practice squad, because Payton keeps 4 running backs all the time. He's generally kept 4 running backs at a time.
Okay, that's important to note there. Our friend Uncle Ted is a huge Audric Estime enthusiast or optimist, saying that Estime, the rookie, will be the clear RB1 in Denver by week 4.
I don't think he will be, but we do like Estime. He's a weird case. He's kind of a fringe prospect because he runs the 4.7. I'd see Ted is saying that he just had a bad knee. I didn't hear that. All his other testing was fine, including his 10-yard split. So Estime, I think, will end up working out because even though he runs the 4.7, he runs just fast enough in that first 5 yards that I think he can kind of be an effective power runner. And obviously he's got good feet. He's pretty elusive. But yeah, I think it's just like there's a certain lack of speed threshold where if you pass it, you just aren't going to work in the NFL. And Estime, I think, is going to prove to have landed like right before it. Like James Conner's right before him, and then there's Estime, and then there's Braylon Allen, and that's bad. You don't want to be the Braylon Allen here.
No, you don't. So I mean, where the ADP is with Estime, like being available with your last pick, like I'll continue to get shares here and there, but I'm not going to target it aggressively or necessarily expect that to.
He's just really nice depth for them to have at a cheap price, So it's if Williams walks in free agency after this year, if Pirine gets cut before or traded before camp, or if they just get rid of him after this season, they'll be glad that they took Estime in the 5th round this year, because they'll largely have the whole thing accounted for. But I do like Estime, and I do think he has a lot of skill, because the production can't be explained by the athleticism exactly. So he just kind of knows how to play running back in a way that's not always easy to pin down or prove.
Yeah, he was definitely a fun watch at Notre Dame. Like I'm pulling for him, but just the numbers are what they are. Like you said, like we're talking about a guy like right on that borderline as far as uh, whether he'll actually get a significant role in the NFL. Speaking of some other last round targets, so Vegas, things are pretty. It's difficult to decipher. There's a lot of new faces, new pieces in that backfield and in that offense generally. And Zamir White obviously getting taken as the first of those running backs, in the 8th round, somewhere in that region. But he's never really been the workhorse before, so it might be prudent to speculate on a Raiders backup in that backfield. So between Alex Mattison at 213 and Dylan Laube at 215, so essentially last picks of your drafts, how do you see this breaking down? Is there one that you prefer between those two?
Is Laube how we say it? I'll go with that.
That's how Sislowski said it. So I'll roll with him.
I usually hedge when I don't know and just switch each time, but I'll stick with Laube. Laube is interesting, and I think he's a better prospect than someone like Will Shipley, who went in the late 4th round. Granted, Laube is much older. He's like 24 or something like that. So maybe that was the basis of distinction there. But Laube's athletic testing is totally sufficient, in my opinion, especially for the particular way that you deploy him in an offense, which is to say mostly a passing down back, maybe like a poor man's, what would you call it, Eckler or Danny Woodhead or something like that. Maybe he's not as fast as Woodhead is the only thing, but he is Laube is a really good pass catcher, and he's quick. Like his three cone time was good. His jumps were solid, and his 10-yard split was good. So, if you can get that 10 yards quickly, if you can be quick with the ball, if you can be quick and flexible in your routes, then he has the necessary athleticism to handle the tasks that he would otherwise project for. So maybe Laube can't be much of a runner, but I do think in the right offense, he could be someone who catches like 60 passes, even as just a rotational back. But more likely, Laube is probably not playing a whole lot this year. At the very least, it would probably take White missing time, or Mattison, I guess, missing some time. I don't expect Zamir White to do that much on passing downs. I think White, in a lot of ways, is kind of like the Chuba Hubbard of the Raiders offense, in my opinion, in that, like, yeah, he's not going to do that much on passing downs, but who cares? They're always going to give him 15 carries. Not always 15 carries in Hubbard's case, but in White's case, they're always going to give him 15 carries. Like, they have to run a no-tempo, run-heavy offense. They don't have a choice on the matter. They only can run their offense that one way. So there might be times where there's pass-catching work at the running back reps that White is not getting, and either of Mattison or Laube, I think, can project for that. But Laube is definitely the more interesting from scrimmage threat, because Mattison, part of his utility as a running back is he can take on volume and he can do a lot of blitz pickup and stuff like that. But if you're talking creating yardage with targets, yardage with snaps even maybe, then Laube is more interesting. So it's one of those things where you just kind of have to keep an eye on it. And as we've seen, as much as there's no way to predict it, there's plenty of times throughout most seasons where it's just like all of a sudden we're wondering, is this 3rd or 4th running back starting this week for this team? It happens. And if that situation comes up, I think you can believe in Laube if he for some reason is on the field. PPR anyway. I don't expect him to do much as a ball carrier, but as far as the event of Zamir White missing time, I think in that case Mattison becomes the runner. He gets like pretty much all the carries because it's going to be, again, like an anti-tempo, power-based, controlled field position, control the clock type offense, and they need to dole out those kind of like human shield carries. And Mattison is well built to kind of make the interior of a defense sort of use up its stamina and take on these kind of high burden plays over and over to set up the play action threat.
So with all of this in mind, you're picking between these two in the last round of a best ball draft. you're given this opportunity 10 times. What's your split as far as the exposure goes?
On something like underdog, I would just take Mattison pretty much every time, just because the half point PPR would kind of put a little bit of a dent in Laube. But in full point PPR, for instance, something like NFFC, I'd be much more interested in having Laube on there than a half point PPR site, because I don't really expect Laube to ever be more than a drawback kind of as a runner. Maybe some plays here and there, but he's got to do his main work as a pass catcher, and it's easy to imagine him having some game, especially with how much Minshew and O'Connell both check down all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to imagine Laube kind of just peeling off 3 catches in one hurry-up drive at the end of the second quarter, you know?
Yeah, so I think, with that in mind, he's definitely going to have to be on my best ball radar for sites with full point PPR. I did have that one. Everyone knows this. It's like a meme stat at this point. But he had like 220 receiving yards against Central Michigan this past year.
Wasn't it like 290 or something?
It was preposterous. Whatever it was like they're just like, actually, you're Brandon Marshall today.
They have to fire that defensive coordinator at halftime for that. You cannot let that. That's a complete collapse. Anyway, a very, very funny game though.
Yes, truly. Some of the best New Hampshire football that you're ever going to see. Let's round it out. One more backfield quickly. So we know Christian McCaffrey is first overall pick in pretty much any format, but how do you handicap the situation behind him between Elijah Mitchell, who's going ADP 178, and Isaac Guerendo at 215? So essentially free in these drafts thus far.
Yeah, this one will probably be annoying if it ever comes up during the season. If McCaffrey's, if he were to, God forbid, miss a game or two or whatever, it would be pretty tough to figure out how to speculate on that 49ers backfield at that point, because while we know that Elijah Mitchell is the first guy up after McCaffrey, obviously, it sucks, but Mitchell's had a lot of injury troubles the past few years, specifically with his knees. And I don't believe he had those problems at Lafayette. So it's kind of concerning that it's, it seems like it might be sort of snowballing. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully he finally gets some good luck, because we saw his rookie year, Elijah Mitchell is a hell of a running back. He's actually toolsy too. It's like people sometimes look at his 6th round pick pedigree and go like, oh, he's some kind of bum. But no, he's pretty much a burner, and he really knows how to play. So if he's healthy, Mitchell can just, like nothing, just become his rookie year self again. As far as the odds that he has that much injury luck, I have no idea. I just have absolutely nothing as far as that goes. And what would make it annoying if Mitchell couldn't have a clear role, it would be annoying because not only can Guerendo also do huge damage in that offense, I think even Jordan Mason's pretty good. I don't think they're going to cut Jordan Mason. So he's more powerful than, or at least he's more built for kind of like rugged running than certainly Mitchell. And I think even Guerendo is pretty powerful. He actually, even though he runs the 4.33, he's also 220, and he runs with pretty good power. He's just had a ton of hamstring problems, and he had a Liz Frank injury a couple of years ago. So Guerendo, whereas Mitchell has never stayed healthy in the NFL, Guerendo has not really stayed healthy in college at all. And sometimes those things turn for the better, sometimes they don't. But I will say, as much as I think Mitchell and Mason are both potentially good and certainly capable of producing in the Shanahan offense, it, for me, is hard to get the idea completely out of my head about Guerendo, because I mean, it's just one of those things, like, even if Guerendo is useless for 30 teams, for the Shanahan offense, he might be truly dangerous, like at least whatever Raheem Mostert was to them. I could see Guerendo for volume limitation reasons having a statistical profile kind of like Mostert, but he's actually 25 pounds heavier than Mostert and every bit as fast or faster. And Guerendo can catch passes too. So I could almost imagine it being like a Damian Williams on the Chiefs thing, where it's like, hey,
yes.
if you get the fast guy who can catch and the offense is rolling all the time, it's just like, it sucks to have to chase a really fast guy when you're struggling on defense, and especially when he's 220 and can easily catch passes too.
Yeah, he's going to be a load to bring down. So yeah, if we were just drafting like running back tools and athleticism, like Guerendo would have gone much higher. But again, the production wasn't really commensurate of a super high draft pick for him. But at the same time, like the tools could be pretty ridiculous if unlocked properly. And I think at this stage, we have reason to believe that Shanahan could, if posed with that opportunity. But just who knows if it happens this year? And with McCaffrey, assuming that he's able to stay healthy, it's going to be tough for any of these guys to like really find their footing. But at the same time, if you're betting on the traits, Guerendo is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I will say he was actually pretty productive in college. He just kind of kept getting hurt, and then Braylon Allen was playing ahead of him at Wisconsin. So Guerendo is one of those guys. He's pretty much only succeeded when he's gotten the chance, and if his health cooperates, if he gets a shot, especially in that offense, I mean, he could almost do like Devon Achane stuff in that offense. Like if Guerendo took 10 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown, that would be terribly unsurprising. It's just like, oh yeah, the 4-3-3 guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it would just be like, oh, they got him in the game, and then you wouldn't be shocked at all by like that type of stat line with the explosiveness baked in. That's going to do it for us on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, breaking down some of the unsettled backfields across the league. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening. And once again, this podcast was presented by our good friends over at Prize Picks. We'll catch you next week.